Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Demai, Perek Aleph, Halacha Aleph. We're going to be learning Daf Gimel. We left off on Daf Beis, Amid Beis, towards the last word of the third line before the bottom of the Amid, Rabbi Yossi ben Chalfuta. And what we are going to be learning, let's quickly recap, is the following. We just came off learning a machlokes whether bakidois are early ripening figs that are so few and are so early that the owner normally does not pay to have a guard those figs. So the question is, do we interpret his lack of hiring a guard as he doesn't care about it, meaning it's hefker, and therefore it won't be subject to maisres at all, right? Or not, or just because he doesn't have a guard right now, lav dafke, it means that he's mafker it. Actually, when the other figs are going to get ripened and he'll get a guard, he will want for the guard to guard all of them. That was the machlokes regarding the bakiros. But what the Braisa calls the misuyafos, milashon soif, that figs that ripen at the end, let's remember what's the end, mishiyakaplu hamikutsois, which means that if after the harvesters are going to put away, are going to fold up their knives, the knives that they would use to trim the blocks, as we explained, of the press figs. Once the kalim that are needed to preserve the product was completely stored away, everyone agrees that if something then becomes ripened, the owners completely disregard them, and therefore they become hefket, and therefore they are completely exempt from trumas u'maisros. That's where we left off from. We're going to continue on that topic. We're going to have something very interesting that we already pointed out, both in brachas and in Peah, and that is that there are certain stories that are recorded in the Yerushalmi. The same story is recorded in the Bavli, different. And I'm sure at some point, could be there already is, and it's something which will be very interesting to compile these stories and to point out and to try to understand better the differences we have between them, much way beyond the stories that we had, let's say, in Brachas and Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis in the Bavli, the whole story of Rabbi ben Azarian, how he became the Nasi, how there were certain details that are written in the Bavli that they were not written in the Yerushalmi, and vice versa. And then there were discrepancies, which is even more interesting. This is going to be a story that one can even argue it's a separate story, but it sounds like it's the same story, but it's very different. And we need a lot of chachma to understand if indeed it was the same event. How are we to explain the different angle, the degree of the difference of the angle of the way it's explained here in the Yerushalmi verses? And we're going to read out the Gemara today. I brought with me in the Dorim. And after we read the story here, we'll read the story in the Bavli. From there, we're going to go to an extreme application of the rule of Batla Daitoi Eitzel Kol Adam. Amazing, as we will see. We're going to have the sheet of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda that holds that one of the other of the 8 items we had in the beginning of this Perek, and those are the noivlois, which means dates that are so inferior because they don't ripen on the tree. Noivlois hatamarim. The Mishnah says these are one of the items that are not subject to the dinim of the Mai. So Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda says, if the owner does not sell them together with ordinary dates, if they are sold together with ordinary dates, then they are not considered something inferior. They will not be excluded from the din of the Mai. And that's going to open up for the first time in this Masechta something called Oinas HaMaisros. And this is important to have, because we already spoke out in this Masechta the whole idea of Gemar Melacha, whether it's the Meruach, whether it is Riyas Pnei Habayis. We spoke out about there is a point after which the obligation of tithing is so important that you can't even have a achilas ara, you can't even have a casual snack. Prior to those points, you can have a casual snack, but prior to that point, if someone opted to tithe, the tithing was effective. So now we're going to learn about something new, and that's a prior step, and that is called Oinas HaMaisros. Oinas HaMaisros means the stage prior to which the item is not even called food, and therefore you cannot tithe it. It cannot be tithed, or even if you went through the motions, it had no effect. So my many products, we already also learned this in brachas, I think, or maybe even in pay, but earlier on, that prior to it reaching a third, while it's still connected to the ground, it's so immature, not even a third, it's not called oichel. If it's not called oichel, even if you were to cut it and for whatever reason separate truma gadola, it did nothing. So we're going to be learning about it. And now we're going to learn an exception that even when something did not reach oinas hamaisrais, if it's mechubar, if it's connected to another of its type that already reached that stage, since the one that already reached oinas hamaisrais has to be tithed, that which is connected to it could be tithed. That's going to be a big rule that we're going to learn today. And if we have time, we're going to invite it. We're going to come to a certain conclusion the Gemara has that we spoke of when we learned the Mishnah, that the eight fruits that the Mishnah mentions in the beginning of the Masechta, that the Mishnah says that they are so insignificant and therefore they are excluded from the Mai. Let Rabbi Yechanan because they're hefker, right? Let Shlakish because even if they're not hefker, the owner finds them so insignificant. Why would he refrain from doing everything properly when anyways it has no value? Which whatever the rationale is behind it, all of the eight are only insignificant in Galul. Masha'enkin in Yehuda, the eight that the Mishnah mentions there, they are significant or they might be significant. And that's clearly in the Mishnah that the three that the Mishnah mentions in Yehuda are only insignificant in Yehuda, not in the Galul. Which basically means that all of the items that are mentioned in the Mishnah are really subject to time and place. The din is eternal, that if something reaches the level of insignificance as the ones that are enumerated in the Mishnah, they are exempted from the mind. That means you buy it from an Amaretz and you can eat it clear, you don't have to do anything. But the specifics, you have to see where are you, what is it, to have that, to weigh, to see whether this insignificance is still continuing in this location. Okay, that's going to be basically today's daf. And that Beis Amid Beis, right towards the end of the third line, going into the bottom of the Amid. This is where we are continuing with the Braisa, guys. We already chazered over, right, the Bakiros versus the Misuyafos. So says the Gemara that Rabbi Yossi ben Chalfuta, that's a Tana Amar Hashisin. Hashisin is the first item mentioned in the Mishnah, right? The Mishnah mentions Shisin, Rimen, Uzradim, Benoy Shuach. Okay. And we said shisin are wild figs, a certain type of wild figs. But the ones that grow in the city of Tzipoiden, they are significant enough. Why? Because we presume, it's all about a chazaka, that they will be guarded. Look inside. Let's go with the last line in the Pnei Moshe. Hashish and Shabbos because they are chashuvin. Let's go with the Marafulda. Marafulda 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Shemecheskas mishtamers sholei mafkir lohu. He's going with the sheet of Rabbi Yechanan's explanation. Don't forget, according to Resh Lakish, it has to do with you not refraining from tithing something that has no little value to it. He's going with the words of Rabbi Yechanan. Sholei mafkir lohu. And even though, even in Sipaiden, a person would not hire a shomer to guard only the shisin, that's linking it to what we just learned a few lines above. A person will leave it on the tree, actually is bashal until when it becomes ripe. A person leaves it on the tree, and when the others become ripe and you harvest it, the very fact the owner harvests it, that's another good liner. He's not mafkid it. He's not going to invest a shomer for it, but v'koitzitz animon. Gewaltig. And now, what the Marafulda wants to add an important point, that he's linking Rabbi Yossi ben Chalfuta with the shita we just learned above, that just because you might not guard it, it doesn't always mean that you're being mafkid it. Aval, the second to last line in the Marafulda, Aval hamisuyafos, but even over there in Sipaiden, those figs, whether they are shisin or whether they are any figs, the ones that become, they're such baby boomers. That means they become ripened so late that that the owners who need those tools, who need the knives to be able to preserve them, they are already so much after the season that they already stored the kalim that they need for its storage. In kedai sula alis bishvilan be'ilan, no one, the owner, won't even bother himself to go up on the tree and to go and harvest them, and therefore he's mafkir them. So that's a real great marafulda. In other words, he's saying that you hiring a guard or not hiring a guard, that's the machlokes we had above, whether that should be interpreted as you're being mafkir. But one thing is clear: if the owner has a product on the tree and he doesn't even go through the trouble to climb the tree to take it down, that means that his relationship with that fruit is that which you have with heaven. Gavaldik. Okay. Says the Gemara weiter, and here we are continuing to learn a brayso that nistaifel hateinim, that if you have these late ripening figs, now the person, if all he would have had were those te'enim, of course he would not have put a shoym. But it happens to be that on this field, in another locality, but in the same field, there are vines and there are grapes. The grapes were not yet ripened, okay? Were it not for the grapes, guys, he would not put a guard to guard the figs. But mitzat sheni, since he has a guard guarding the grapes, the guard is also looking out for the figs. Verstehst? And now let's go with the shita that holds that the lack of putting a guard is an indication you're mafkeret. Putting on a guard is an indication that you are keeping your ownership with it. How are you to interpret it over here? Similarly, something similar. If you have grapes, and these are the grapes that are so late, they ripen so late that it's insignificant for you. Like, let's go with the marafulda. You would never even harvest them. Happens to be that you have right nearby, you have vegetables, for example. And the vegetables is something of significance. The vegetables are something that's so significant that you hire a guard to guard that locality. Once he's guarding the vegetables, he's guarding the grapes. So is it hefker or is it not hefker? So says the Brayso like this: that if guys, there is a halacha that a worker at some phase of his job of working with something that's still connected to the ground and he's going to be harvesting it, the Torah says that he is allowed while he's working to nash off that product. Not the El Keliyachal Loy Sitain, it says in the Chumash, you can't take it home, but he can eat it when he's there. Now, if a worker, let's go in the first case, the worker was, the shomer was here to guard the anavim. Happens to be that there are figs there. Will the owner be makbid if he's also going to eat the figs? So if the owner is going to be makbid for him taking the figs, that's an indication that the owner was not mafkid. And therefore, asura is mishum gezel, and subsequently, guys, you're chayiv to tithe it. But if the worker who has the right from the Torah to eat the grapes, he doesn't have the right to eat the figs because he wasn't hired to guard the figs. But if he were to go and take the figs, don't say, ooh, don't take the figs. That means the balabayis is makbid on the figs. Is that he was not mafkid? No, we have to just find a circumstantial evidence. What's his relationship to these late harvesting figs? If he's makbid, gezel, ubemela, it's chayiv in maisnes. Look inside the top marav folder. The staifa hata'enu ba'akato masham es soda, even though they're only, the figs are late, but he's guarding it because of the anavim. If there were late harvested grapes, which in itself he would not even put a shomer, but he does put a shomer because of our vegetables. And if we don't know in hifkir hamisiyofim, did he give up? Did he abandon it? Because he thought that other people are going to harvest it. Because, like we mentioned before, the marafulda, he himself will not make the trouble to go up on the tree. Another detail adds the marafulda. We're speaking about the time he already folded the knives. And we learned that before, as we just began the chazara today, Dan, that if the owner stores the utensils that are needed for the preservation of that product, that means the season is over. That l'kula alma normally would be interpreted to mean that he's mafkid it. And like the marafulda says, and he's not even going to bother going on the tree. But over here, there's a nuance. What's the nuance? That in the same field, there's another product that he's not mafkid. for which he puts a shomer. So how are we to determine whether he's mafkid or not? So that's the word. If the poil is going to be nashing off here the late ripened figs, and the owner will be makbid, he's makbid is araya. Now, by the way, there's a chiddush in that. What's the chiddush in that? Because maybe, and that's what we're going to see. There's a concept called batla daitel eitzel koladim. That will be the stories we're going to have right now. That again, we're speaking about this scenario. I have a product. I harvested it. The season is over. I put away the kalim that I need to make whatever I harvest last. I mean, that's it. That means it's over. It's like when you close your store. The ending. So Chazal say when you do that, automatically you're mafkir the product. Now, can the owner later say, "Whoa, you can't take it"? There was a svara to say it's too late. You were mafkir it already. But this Baraisa is not saying so. In the case where there's a shreimer, that's the key.
Is it all according to Rabbi Yochanan?
No, we're going at lit Rabbi Yochanan. Yeah. No, this idea of hefker is lakula alma, because we're not talking about damai. We're talking about bachlal. Very good.
All right. Can the shomer eat it at any time anyway?
That's the whole question. What happens if the balabas says you can't eat it because I only hired you to guard the grapes, not the figs, which is the truth. The figs knows what were to happen if the guy plucks a fig off the tree and he begins to eat it. This Braisa says if the owner says, "Woo, don't do that," then it's taka not hefker, it's taka a gezel and chayv b'maisvus. And we'll see from Tanoim, it's not necessarily the case. Guys, we're reading a story right over here, and again, we'll read the same story in the Darim. And it's so different that you can even say it's a different story, but it doesn't sound like it's a different story, but it's like, wow, the difference of how it's recorded in Yerushalmi and versus the Bab. Ulabar Yishmael shared the following in the name of Rabbi. So this is the beginning, the era of the Amoraim. They're sharing a Maisa that happened, Bisman HaTanoim, and who are the Tana? No other than Rabbi, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. That what? That they once nichnusu loichel b'misu yafais b'diyuk this case. So they are in the Holy Land, right? They lived in Tiberia, and it was after the season, and people already stored their nights. And that's the general rule that we learned, l'kula alma, and they found up some fig, and they took it. V'tzavach b'hem ha'shomer. Now, guys, the shomer is not the owner. Whether the guard was there for it, it's not clear. We'll see in the Babli other details. Whether the guard was there for some other product, like we said, maybe there was another product. Bottom line is that there was a guard there, and he told him, "Whoa, you can't do that." Umashach Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda's Yadav. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, because of the shoutings of the guard, felt, the shomer is makbid on behalf of the balabas. Balabas is makbid, so I can no longer presume it's hefker. Amalei Rebbe told him, you don't have to stop eating. That echoil, you could eat. Shekfar nisyasha ha'ba'alamem, the owner already despaired. Okay. Now, before we go on, I'm taking out over here a Babel. And again, if someone is going to argue it's a complete different story, it sounds like it, but it sounds like it's the same story, but it's very different. And that's on the Dorim, Daf Samach Beis Amud Aleph, towards the top of the Amid. And the story is Rab Chama, but Rab Chanina, I'm sorry, Rebbe Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. That's why same names. That Iklu Lahai Asra. That this is Mamush, the second line from the top of Ramah. They went to a certain place. Bisman Shehukpulu Roiv HaMakutzois. Hukpulu Roiv HaMakutzois. There's another one. In other words, they didn't know whether that owner folded the knives, but you go after the Roiv. That's another thing that we have been learning. Bein Rabbi Yechanan, Bein and Al Shlakish. It's a Ruba the Lesa Kaman. But if the people in this region, most of them already put away their instruments that they need, Rebbe Havaka'achel, and Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda lo yachel. So again, it sounds like the same story. That's what happened over here. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda was the one that stopped eating, but here, here in the Babli, it's not the shomer. It's a big difference. It's the owner. The owner came and said, "Why aren't you eating?" Now, guys, first of all, Rebbe was eating. So, or either it could be punkt when he came, no one was eating, or he was only talking to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. And Why aren't you eating? It's almost like the owner was telling them, you can eat. So now you would think that if the owner said that, Rabbi Yossi ben Rabbi Yehuda would eat. Why? Because he holds Mishum Savar Sanyus Milsahu de Kamar Haden Gabra. Sanyus Milsa means sarcastic. Like he wasn't certain how to interpret his words. Like you can eat, or you can eat. You're coming into my field. Like hey, ganovim. You know. Now it's so difficult to chap, but maybe let's go on and to see if it was the same incident. So first of all, this detail of the shomer shouting, that can also be. And then the owner came. Like if you want to put it all together, that's something that we'll leave open. We'll come back to this in a moment. But now in the Yerushalmi, Rabbi Yechanan boy, Zajac va'at Omar came. How the Yerushalmi is trying to understand the shita of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. What do I mean? The guard is telling, don't touch these products. So how would you be allowed to take it? So Omar Rabbi Yoina, Ya'usu Makshe, that the L'chaira Rabbi Yechanan is right. The question is on Rabbi. However, he's not right. It sounds like he's right. But I have a Mishnah and Meislis from where we see otherwise. And like we mentioned before in the intro, these are the words, guys. There's something called Batla Daitel Eitzel Kolodam. That means that there is a concept that it doesn't even matter what you are shouting. We follow a certain halachic application of the fact that people put away their knives. Now, the guy shouting, though, could mean that he wants to re-own it. It's too late. It's hefker. But let's read what happens. There's a Mishnah in Meisres that's speaking about Sia and Ezoiv and Koiranis. Kaven will love it. These are three types of herbs: pennyroyal, hyssop, and savory. These are herbs that normally grow in the wild, which means that they are readily available. People don't have to plant, which would perhaps make all of them hefker, because it grows everywhere. Nevertheless, says the Mishnah, that if they are in your yard, guys, we have like this: we have a field, we have an orchard, and we have a chutzit. The chutzit is the closest to you. The chutzit is where you'll be the most makbid. That number one, it's in your yard, and number two, if you are making an effort to protect them, then we don't say they're hefker, and therefore the chayiv in maises, which implies, says the Gemara, showing that Rabbi Yechanan's kasha is not such a great kasha on Rabbi. Rabbi does make sense that hobagina, even if it's, forget about if it's out there in the field, even if it's in a property that's not mamash under your nose, which is the gina, the garden, even if they are nishmarim, still they are exempted from being tithing, which is a big chiddush. Why? Because batlot daitel eisel b'nei adam. In other words, if something is hefker, once something is hefker, just because the owner says, "Ooh, don't take it," no, it's hefker. He's being greedy now. It's almost as if he was mafked it, and now he's trying to retract. He can't retract. Okay, so that's the word over here. So coming back to the story, that even though I want to go now to the Bavli says it wasn't only the shomer. The Bavli says that the owner was telling them to eat. I'm going to go in both ways. In both ways, even if the owner opines, so what? If something is already halachically hefker, in our case, because it's so late in the season that the owners in this region, they put away their knives. And like the Marafulda says, people are not planning to go up even to bother themselves to take it off the tree. There's no point. You can't store it. You'll have one from hefker. Anyone can have the one. Once you have that relationship with your product, it's hefker. What you say now doesn't change.
If you've done all your tithing, you've done all the stuff you need to do.
You did.
In general, how can you say that anything after a certain point is also hefker? It's not yours.
No. Tithing has nothing to do with this. If you have a field, and you're growing a product that you harvest to preserve. First of all, it's a product that most of it is harvested for preservation.
Yes.
So the figs were done that way. There was such an abundance of fruits in Israel. You have to understand, it wasn't like today you can harvest it and you buy a fresh fig. They didn't have refrigeration. And all of the steps that were needed, all of the tools that were needed for its preservation was stored by the owner.
Right,
so the Torah says the truth that in most cases the owner won't even bother himself to pick it off the tree.
What does that matter?
Once that happens, it's hefker. Once that happens in hefker, once it's hefker, even if the owner says go, don't take it, you get five. But that's what Rabbeinu Chadash is saying. I'm just reading the words of Rabbi. And the beauty is that or what has to be explained is that in the Bavli, the story is that the owner said to eat. Here we're saying that the shomer said not to eat. It really changes a lot. It really changes a lot. Now, the story is being related over here by Ula bar Yishmael b'shem Rabbi Yechon. In the Bavli, we don't have it being related in these names. That means that maybe there was two versions of the story. It sounds like the same story too. Once we have the Bavli open, I just want to read to you. I know it's getting like one Gavaldic story on this topic for you. Rab Tarfon, Ashkeche, I'm reading in the Bavli Nedarim, okay? Rab Tarfon, Ashkeche lo Gavra, he found a certain Bisman Shuk Pulam Aksois de Ka'ach. There was a guy that had a field of figs. He already stored his Caleb. The Torah says at that point it's hefker. Rab Tarfon was walking by the field, and Rab Tarfon began to eat. What did the owner do? The owner found him. The owner got so angry with him, not knowing that this is Rab Tarfon. That achzei besaka, he put him in a sack, and b'shakle, and he began to take him to the river to throw him in the river, to drown him. And he realized that he's in trouble. He's going to get killed. So Amaloi, so Rab Tarfon said, Oy loy Tarfon shazarogi. What was it to Tarfon that was about to get killed? Letting him know that it's Tarfon. Oh, Shamo Gavra, that person heard that it's not Tarfon, that it's the Rebbe, you understand? Shaf came out, he dropped him and he ran away. So Amar Abba Bishum Rab Chanan Gamaliel, Kol Yom of Shaloi Sat Tzadik. For the rest of his life, Rab Tarfon would say that I sheneshtamashti b'kisra shel Torah. I used the fact that I'm Rebbe Tarfon to save my life. He regretted doing it. Almost as if he had the right to allow himself to get killed. What a story. In other words, this is the point. The point is that without learning Torah, you would think, it's my field. The Torah says that once the Torah determines you have hefker, people can take it. And we are a proud capitalist, right? It's like rubbing us the wrong way. And that guy was so angry. You see the anger of a capitalist on a communist. I'm saying, like you're taking it. He wanted to kill him. He put him in a sack and he's going to throw him in the river.
So like
by screaming at him.
1 second.
It's private property where anybody can just walk into your field, even after you've already.
They're not allowed to walk in your field. But if they walked in your field and they took it, if something is hefker, that's another thing. If your field is being guarded, that's what we're learning.
Yeah.
So maybe we learned yesterday that according to some opinions, if you have a guard here, we're learning now, according to the opinion that says a guard doesn't mean anything.
A gate is not a guard?
Could be. I'm saying could be these things that's you have to know how to interpret it. It could be. Another thing. Nowadays it's not shaykh, really, because nowadays we have refrigeration. Nowadays, first of all, we're not farmers. So you're thinking about you have maybe in your backyard a lemon tree. It's a whole different relationship. We're speaking about a person who has a business that they have a fig farm. They have a fig orchard. Just understand that. This is not you having your lemon tree. No. That's your livelihood. And you work with it and then you harvest it. And at some point, that was the end of the season. Just understand that at that moment, in that context, according to that's a machlokes between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi and Rabbi Yossi. It's a machlokes Talmud.
Shot of a shomer as a person?
What was that?
Shot here of a shomer.
Yeah, here it's a person. Yeah. Okay. Now this is such a powerful thing. Now Rabbi Yochanan was saying, what I mean, that the owner is shouting. Rabbi Yochanan is saying like you're saying, but the guy is shouting. The Gemara is saying, you see from the story, you see from the Mishnah over there in Maises, that certain products are inherently insignificant and the owner can shout until he's blue in his face. If it's in the Gina, it's hefker. So the Gemara is going to say Rabbi Yochanan will differentiate one case from the other. Taman over there, in the case of these herbs, that they are in the Gina, you're right that the Mishnah implies that in the Gina, they are hefker. But you have to understand something, which means that this is a product that's so inherently insignificant that they grow everywhere automatically. So that's where we say, however, over here, like that's what to your point, it's different. Here, you planted the figs. The figs is something that's chashuv. We're speaking about this fig because you decided to fold up your knives. That doesn't mean it's inherently insignificant. What happens if the owner of this field would have folded up his knife a week later? Then it would have been geneva. So that's a difference. But here, even if there's only one basketful, but there's a shomer there, the shomer is guarding it. And the shomer is saying, don't take it. So to say batla daitai is a much bigger chiddush. But you should know, Rabbi still says it. Now, next case in the Mishnah.
So you can't tell yourself, I'm going to save my figs after I put my stuff away from my family and put a shomer there. And there's a machloket that says even if you put a shomer there and you want to save those end of the season figs for your family.
I don't think you're wording it correctly. I'm happy we're having this conversation and we'll have time to finish the daf. God knows the truth. What I'm saying now is the way I understand it. Objectively, if this was the intent of the owner, then it's not hefker. However, I don't know what's in your mind. You're the owner and I'm the nudnik coming and trying to take your figs. I don't know what's in your mind. So there's a certain halachic presumption. And the owner who's self-righteous like you are, we don't trust that you'll be honest. Because what could have happened is that when you folded up your knives, that act is an act of hefker. That act is, I know that feeling. It's like when you close the store at the end of the holiday season, when you shut it, right? And you're selling and chapping arayin, and then there's some point you're like, that's it, enough. At that point, you walked away from it. Then when you see me going into your field, you get reawakened. Ooh, you're taking my figs. I don't let you take my figs. It's almost that you are trying to change the hefker. Too late. So if you were never mafked, you're right. If that was your intent, I think you're right. I finished doing it. The couple of figs. I have family. I have friends. I'm going to take them. If that is your intent, it's not hefker. But I don't know what your intent is. And we don't say, since it's yours, who am I? We don't say that. Okay. But the next case in the Mishnah was, there's a certain type of date that's called noivlis. In the Mishnah, we says noivlis means dates. Normally, dates become ripened on the tree. There are certain fruits that never get ripened on a tree, like an avocado, I think. But certain fruits should get ripened on the tree. But if this is a type, it's so inferior, this type, this tree, that the ones on the tree never become ripened, even though there are techniques that you take it off the tree and you put it in a bag and you put it in the sun, you put it with an esrog. I don't know what to do. That's the Mishnah says it's not chashuv again. Either Rabbi Yechanan, you're not mafked, lidei shlakish, not because you're mafked, because why wouldn't you give all the trumas of Maasros when it has such little value? Oh, so comes along Tani, we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda says there's an exception. She's not arguing with the Mishnah necessarily, but here's the exception: that hanoivlois hanimkaros im hatmarim. If the owner has normal tumarim, normal dates, and he has noivlois, and when he sells them mixed together. We'll see what that means. That's an indication that the owner was not mafkedet, l'Rabbi Yechanan. That's an indication that the owner does not consider them so insignificant, l'Rei Shlakish, and therefore they are subject to the dinim of Maasros and to the Mai like anything else. Harei elu chayavos. Okay, so here we do say, see, the Gemara loves doing that. So we just learned a sugya that what the owner does later doesn't necessarily mean that was his intent the whole time. Okay, we're leaving that. Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda, by the way, Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda in the story was the one, it goes, Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda was the one that says that if the owner is shouting, I was not mafked, we have to believe the owner. Very good, it goes with him. That let's look at what the owner does later. His later actions clarify retroactively what was his intent the whole time. It fits. You got it?
Later actions.
The fact that when he sells the noivlois, he sells them together with the regular tamarim, that's an indication that he was never mafked, or that he never considered it not chashuv. Very good. Mamish liked the story before. Not Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda. Now, the Gemara initially understood, Chevra, What do we mean by selling them together? That there are three options. Option number one is that they're mamish mixed together in the same box. That is not the lachatchila. We don't even think about that because why would an owner do that? It's different quality. The understanding initially is that the owner has normal tomatim in one box, in one bag, in one basket, whatever, and he has the noivlis in another one. He's selling them together, but even there are two ways of selling it together, one on top of the other. When he listen to the psychology, when he puts one on top of the other, that means the owner considers them the same. When he puts one on the side of the other, maybe it's no. Is that case also included in the din of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda, or did Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda only say together when one is on top of the other? Ma, what does he refer to? Is it even shtei kupa izu b'tzadzu, or is it only, guys? That's how we're learning it. If it's one on top of the other, and the Gemara says you got the whole thing wrong. If you put them in two boxes, even if you put it one on top of the other, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda does not say that action retroactively proves that this guy held them to be important. Doesn't prove that. Why doesn't it approve it? He was mafked, but the guy who he hired to pick the dates off the tree picked them also. What, he's going to throw them in the garbage? So now he's like reacquiring it, but it was already hefker. The only time that we say that his action now proves that he never considered it insignificant is if he sells it in the same box. V'loy shanya, he zu b'tzadzu, he zu al gabi zu. Ironically, both of them, not only one on side of the other, even if they are one on top of the other, even Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda will hold that the ones that are noivlois were always deemed insignificant. Like you said, just because they're insignificant doesn't mean that if they come to his hand, why wouldn't he try to capitalize on it? But it doesn't take away the rule of hefker. Ella ki anan kaiman. What was the case? These are the words in the Babli. B'may askinan, and in Yerushalmi it's kaiman. Why do we mekayim? B'ma'irav is when they're mixed together. Now, weiter. Now we are introducing, like we spoke in our words of introduction, the concept of the concept oinas hamaisres. Maze oinas hamaisres. We'll get there in a moment. Let's go read the Gemara inside. It asks the Gemara, are we referring to bishihitilu sa'oir? I know these words sound weird. The literal meaning is, are we speaking about these noivlos? Don't forget, on the tree they don't ripen. But what is one of the signs of the ripening of a date, the way the Gemara calls it, is when the dates swell like sourdough. They write over here, he quotes other words of the Mishnah, the Marafulda, that in the Mishnah Maisis, it's when dates start to develop certain cracks in them, like the sourdough. Now, do you see cracks on your dates? I don't know. We're speaking about a certain type of date that is not matured, but when it becomes matured, like all the dates, the sign of it reaching a certain level of maturity is by dates mishihitilu so'er. You never seen a fresh date. Maybe that's why. So then it crumbles up. Okay. Now, guys, here's the word for you. This is important. When we learned yesterday and 2 days ago, when we spoke about meruach riyas pnei abayis, whether you can even have a snack or not, that's step number 2. Step number 2 is that there is a certain point that you're obligated to tithe it. What happens if someone tithes it before they were mechuyev to tithe it? Is their act an act? The answer is depends. If it was already considered food, even though it wasn't the finished product, but it was oichel, they did not have to tithe it. But if they tithe it, it's an act of meiseres. Prior to it even being food, which is prior to the oinas ha-meiseres, it's not food. You cannot tithe it. And if you did it, it didn't do anything. The oinas ha-meiseres by dates is this mishihitilu so'er. So the Gemara wants to know that when Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda, who sang a chiddush, the Mishnah says noid lois is insignificant. Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda, a brayso is adding, it's insignificant, but if that owner sells it together, then we interpret in the same box that for him, he was never mafked. Okay. Are we talking about him selling the noivlois once they at least reached b'shehitilu so'er, they reached oinas ha'maiseres, or is he even saying his halacha prior to it reaching hitilu so'er? That's a chiddush. The Gemara is going to say, how how can you even think he thinks that? In other words, if it didn't reach Oinas HaMaisres, forget about the Mai, forget about Hefker, forget about Rabbi Yochanan, forget about Reish Lakish. How is it Shaykh to tie? That will be the Chiddush of our Gemara.
When they were side by side or one on top of the other, the original.
That's something else. When they are in the same box. Let's move forward. When they are in the same box. Mix in the same box.
Okay.
Rabbi Yehuda says that it means that for the owner finds everything value. Now the Gemara wants to know, is Rabbi Yehuda even referring to Chodim Shehigia Lo'oinas HaMaisres? Which would mean then, David, that Rabbi Yehuda is saying that you have to, that it's included in the dinim of Maisres. That's a big chiddush. The rule is Chodim Oinas HaMaisres. It's not shaykh to tie anything. The Gemara is going to go through and show you. Could be he meant that. There's a big chiddush. So the Gemara says, Rav Mana Aman, I'll tell you. Machlekes HaMayrayim. Rav Mana says only b'shehitilus oran ankaimin, which makes more sense. Even though it's noivlois, so even though it reached the Oinas HaMaisres, noivlois normally are. Let's go with Rabbi Yochanan. The owner is mafkir them. If the owner harvested and he's selling it in the same box, he was never mafkir. Now, imishitilos oir, says the Gemara, b'fnei hatzman yu chayavos. So if shehitilos oir, then why do we need to have them mixed together? They should always be chayiv. The Gemara says no, leis yachol. That's not true because Rabbi Yochanan, we're going to Rabbi Yochanan, that says roiv haminim ha'elum einam boim elam and a hefker. Lefikoch manoisim chachamim. In other words, yes, it reached this maturity off the tree. It reached that level. Still, most people consider it so insignificant that they're mafkid, and hefkid is exempt. Or, we can go with Reish Lakish. The Gemara doesn't have to go back and forth. That since most farmers deem it so insignificant financially because it is very cheap, why would they not give maises? But it must be Mishitilu Soir. That's Rav Mana. Rav Chanina says that the Tana Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, his chiddush is even b'shaloi hitilu so'aran kaimen. Wow, I frek the Gemara b'shaloi hitilu so'aran kaimen. Then even if they're mixed together in the same box, they have to be puturois because it didn't reach Oinas HaMaisres. Leis yachol. No, the Tana. Look at the word. No, don't say that. You can't even ask the question. Leis yachol. You can't. The Tana learned in the Brayso. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi says in the name of his father, Rabbi Yossi, this is the novelty. Eshkol should be boy Gadger Yechidi. When we speak about Oinas HaMaisres, guys, by grapes, the Oinas HaMaisres by grapes is that the grape reached such a level of maturity that you are able to see through the klipa and see the seed. The Rebbe spoke about this, not specifically, that in nature, the concept of klipas noiga, that in Teva, one of the beautiful things about a grape, why we have such a relationship with grapes, is that in nature there are klipa. Klipa hides what's inside. But by a grape is the only phenomena in Teva that the klipa doesn't hide. It's called noiga, you can see through it. When the grape is very, very little, you can't see through the klipa. What's it called? The skin, the peel. So now what happens if you have a whole eshkol, you have a cluster, and one grape, they're all maturing at the same time, but not as one grape reached Oinas HaMaisres. All the other grapes did not. So he learned a brayso that tells you that if you have an eshkol, you have a whole cluster, shebikar boy, only one garget hit the Oinas HaMaisres. Says the Tana kuloi chibur lemaisres. The way we are going to learn pshat means that all of them are considered to have reached that step. It doesn't mean you're chayiv to be ma'aseh. I want to make it clear. When you're chayiv to tie it, chayiv when you take it into your house. You're chayiv when it reaches the final step. But at least you could. The other grapes are not even on that level. So the way we will learn it is because since it's connected one to the other, if one reached, everything that's connected to it is also included. And that's the vart that since they put them in the same box, now it goes better. It's in the same box. It's called mechuber. Not mechuber because it's like an eshkol, but it's in the same box. The same box is in many other areas. It's called mechuber.
So with the Rebbe?
Chassidim with the Rebbe. That one person has to be mature. Has to be one mature person in the shul, and all of us can stay teenagers and we're good.
All right, why can't we
One
go?
second, Hakim. What you saying?
Can you just say ripe?
The minimum level of ripeness. The minimum level of ripeness.
Once it becomes the minimum level of
That's
ripeness.
that is when it's called oichel. Prior to which it's not called oichel. That's very important.
And second question: these nobles,
Yes.
are these not just like the beginning of the Mishnah that it says that there are these?
Yeah.
Was it?
Noivelis, that's the one we're learning it. So the Mishnah says noivelis are not subject to the mind. The chiddush that we learned today, Abraisa, that if the owner sells them mixed together, they are chayiv.
Yeah, but what do you care if they become ripe or not?
No. In other words, when he said, step. When he said that noivelis, if they are sold together, they are subject to tithing.
Yeah.
The question is it even prior to them being ripe? According to Rabbi Hanina, yes. How is it even shayach? Because they are in the same box. There's so many chidushim there. And let's just finish one more. I know it's late, but I want to finish the topic over here of now. Before we say what the Chachamim say, the Gemara says that in that Braisa that we discussed, with Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda says that if they are mixed together, then they are subject. The Chachamim say that what? Not the way Rav Mana understands Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda. That means the Chachamim argue no matter whose interpretation you learn by. The Chachamim hold the third shita that once noidlos reach the level of there are cracks in it, they are like a sourdough. The Chachamim hold now they're not. You can't say that they are not chashuv. They're chayiv by themselves. The esheloi hitilus on the other noidlos that will never reach that stage, which is normally what would happen. Noidlos is such an underdeveloped product that it will never reach that level, even if they are mixed together. Then they are peturos. Our Mishnah B'chlal does not differentiate. Let me go in our Our Mishnah does not differentiate. Our Mishnah says, in the Galil, guys, we're going to stop over here, is exempt. According to Rabbi Yechanan, let's go today. It's exempt from tithing. Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda says it's up to the owner to be megala his das, how he relates to them. Does he sell them together? According to the Chachamim, they agree with our Mishnah. I don't care about the owner. The owner can mix them up together. It's called batla daitoi. That's batla daitoi means just because you sold them together, it doesn't mean that in your psyche, when you realized they're noiblois, you gave up on them. Just because now you want to go back to it, it's still a product of hefker. But the Chachamim in the Braisa hold that a later event will reveal what they are by nature. If they can somehow reach that level, then you never give up on that which will become right. You don't know which one will become right. A later event will retroactive. If it never becomes enough that it cracks like a sourdough, that is a product that the owner by default is mafker. And no matter what he does later, that's back to that story that we learned, it's still considered hefker to be continued. Gavin, you wanted to ask something?
Yes. All right. Why don't we look at the majority of what's in the box? If majority are ripe and the rest are novelos.
Okay, Kevin, there is. It's not about dates that are ripe or not. We have to become farmers. But when a farmer has a date tree, there are certain dates on the tree that right away will be labeled novelos. It's like that kid in class that special needs. The fact that he can later be developed, it doesn't mean that he's not a special needs. It's a special needs date.
Special needs, got it.
And the question is, are you mafkid it or not? And the fact that you put them all in the same classroom is that we are evolving and we consider all of them developed. They're special, not just they developed, they're even better.